As the founder of a growing startup that understands its customers, has a great product, but hasn't grown a customer acquisition engine or one that can scale with the organization, what are the areas you have to be focused on? This is a question I thought about a lot, not only for my customers, but for the world in general, because there seems to be a lot of conflicting information on what folks need to focus on in this area. And it causes a lot of startups to fail, a lot of startups to flounder, or to take longer to get to market. And it's an area that I'm really fascinated in being able to help and solve. And today I have what I think are my main areas that I would focus on that I think is universally applicable, but particularly for a founder who is focused on driving an effective strategy inside of their business and trying to get everyone moving in the same direction. I believe these are the areas they need to focus on. So hello, my name is Brian Schuster. I work at Lucid Consulting, and we focus on primarily executives inside of small scaling startups, or usually founders within those companies, and really help them focus on what are the things they need to drive inside of their business and have to understand in order to get their first real scalable go-to-market strategy, one that can support their business and help kick them off on the right foot. So the reason this became an area of real fascination for me is because I met founders who were very accomplished. They were even exited in some cases, right? Where they found a business, started it, grew it, and were able to get out of it. And then they're starting another business, and that these principles, these areas, they didn't quite understand. And it's often because when they originally started, they either got lucky, there was somebody in their business who didn't know how to articulate how to get folks, but they just had a person who built it for them. It was that they had enough grit that they could work their way around and figure out things until they got a match, or they copied enough folks here that they didn't really understand these things. And when they went into another environment where the situation was different, they didn't understand what they needed to go through. And for me, this is frustrating because these are folks who are very well accomplished. They're no dum-dums here. They understand what they're doing. They understand their product. They're solving a big need, but they don't always know what activities they need to focus on. Like an example of somebody who doesn't understand these major areas, right, and are going after this might decide, oh, I have a problem getting new customers. So what do they think? Oh, I'm going to hire an ad agency, right? Because again, they know at some point they need to do an activity like running ads or getting salespeople or whatever and go and send them out. They'll go and hire an agency or do it internally, and they get abysmal results. And they look back and go, well, what's wrong? And often when they look at the problems with that particular strategy, there's not one, there's many, many, many issues that come in, and they may not necessarily be able to piece out all the things that are there. And so what we try to do is we try to understand what are the major areas you need to focus on. And again, more importantly, as a founder, this is not the only area you're concerned about. You're not only concerned about customer acquisition. It's a really important area, but you're running an entire business, right? So if you could be an expert, if you could understand every detail, that's phenomenal, right? And some people are capable of doing that. Sometimes though, you're a product expert and you're leading an organization, and the customer acquisition engine is something you need to lead, but you're not necessarily going to understand every single piece that goes into that, but you need to understand the important pieces. So for me, this is my attempt to try to clarify this, to figure out, well, if I had to name what are those pieces that you need to understand and at least do, or at least lead in your organization, what does that look like? So let's go ahead and get started. So on one end, before you really start thinking about your customer acquisition engine, which are the activities that are required for you to find, attract, convert, and then retain customers inside of your organization so that it supports your business model, whatever you decided what you're going to sell, get enough folks, what do you need to do? Before you really get into this and figuring out how do you actually set this up, you need to start with, well, what do you need to understand before you really go whole hog into this? And the reason I say prerequisites is that, well, shouldn't you, when you start a business, shouldn't you know how to get customers? Yes, but it's not the critical thing when you start. The critical thing when you start is to figure out, have I chosen a market that actually has a need? Have I validated this by being able to build a product and get it to market? Do I have confidence that there's a existing market that's out there that if I can go and reach out to them, there will be more folks beyond who I just got in front of me there? And when you look at a lot of early startups on how they got their big customers, and again, this is pretty common, it's just, oh, I had a connection to a big business, right? I'm a former IBMer. I created a product and IBM was my first customer and they love us, right? That's a common story, right? Or, oh, I launched an app on the App Store and turns out the App Store really liked it, popped it to the top of it. Or I went into Product Hunt, got 100 people to take my app, That's good confidence, right? So you're doing some of those activities, but it's not really a robust customer acquisition engine, right? You were able to get some customers, or you had a hyper networker in your side of your business, or you had one person who had a connection, and that's great. But then you think, okay, that got me to $250,000 a year, $500,000 a year. How do I go to 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, beyond? These are the sorts of activities you need to focus on. But before you do, usually understand these areas. Very first thing that I find founders who are ready to build a good customer acquisition engine is really they understand their market segmentation. I'll say market segments. And this is something where if you talk to somebody who has started one of these companies or has a company that makes sense, they go and say, oh, they'll go and say, oh, yes, I understand the, drone market, right? There's people on this level here. There's mid-level folks, there's down here, there's different verticals. They have a good sense of how they slice up the market and where they could be able to go, but maybe they understand like, oh, we belong on this part of the page, right? They may not be able to explicitly say that they're only going to go for these folks, right? But they do know that, oh, we go fishing here and we tend to do okay, right? And we don't go fishing here because it hasn't really worked out so far, and they can talk about it. They understand their market segmentation and can start to point out exactly where they fit into this bigger sphere, right? Or at least be able to talk about it. Particularly, they can talk about their customers well, right? They've talked to this sort of individual, like they'll say stuff like, oh, we're able to get in with this executive and executives loves us, but when we talk to mid-market, it doesn't really work so well, right? They have that sort of thing. And I put that under market segments where they can really, they can talk about that to a high degree. Second thing they understand is their business model. And what I mean by this is that they can tell us, oh, we are a SaaS product. How do we sell? We go out and we sell subscriptions. They don't even need to know the specific price, right? Because again, early on, you're still guessing what the price is. It's like, we think we can get to $50 a month or $100 a month. We're selling it for $25. We can get up there, but we are a SaaS model. And because we're a SaaS model, these metrics are true about us, right? These things are there. A lot of companies, and this is a trap a lot of consulting firms fall into, is that they pick a business model where it's like, well, we're a consulting firm right now, but we might want to sell a product, right? Or they may know, well, we're in this space right now, but we really want to switch into this place. Companies that don't know what business model they're in have a lot of trouble creating a go-to-market strategy because different business models necessitate different areas of setup, different areas they're going to focus on, how much they need to put into things like branding and identifying customers, and how much they need to put onto online content versus hiring salespeople. And if you have multiple of these, it gets really, really complex and really hard, and it tends not to work out. So early stage customers need to understand their business model, need to understand how they drive value into their business, and know they're going to be there long term. That's the next thing. The next area to talk about is the value proposition. And the value proposition says, my customers have these sets of issues that they deal with, right? These are the major pain points they deal with. This is the major stuff they want to do well. And these are the things that they really deal with. A lot of the people I deal with often come from industries. They're very embedded. They know what their customers really deal with day to day. They know the different buyers that they deal with and the type of situations they're in. And they really understand that well. There's a lot of startups, and you see this for, I'm trying not to be not generous here. I'm not trying to be mean here, but to say somebody who jumps on the AI bandwagon and then looks and says, oh, I want to start healthcare because there's a lot of money in healthcare and they don't have a lot of AI, which is, yeah, technically true, but they really can't tell you a lot about the value proposition. They focus mostly on features, right? They say, oh, the AI can go and basically it's an LLM that has data stores set in back, and that if you pull that in, you can do this stuff. They can tell you a lot about the features, but they can't tell you, like, okay, well, what's the specific pain point, right? Talk to me about the individuals you've dealt with. Talk to me about the people you've interacted with, and tell me what they feel. And often they go, like, there's a fuzziness there that they don't quite understand. It's not a problem. There's been lots of businesses that have gone out and started in completely brand new industries. But if you're really thinking about a robust go-to-market strategy, if you do not understand your value proposition and how your product is specifically solving that, matching pains to specific benefits you get from it, understanding the features, you're not going to get to the point where you can really go into the next step. The final thing, which is really not an area, but it's more of an awareness of what capabilities you are, it's really an awareness of where you can go, is really your capabilities and resources. Now, based on the organization you have, you're going to have founders that come from different backgrounds. You're going to have strategic hires that bring certain capabilities to your organizations. You're going to be in different funding scenarios at different stages. In order for you to be able to understand what strategy you're going to execute, right? What your sales funnel is going to look like, how you're going to talk to people, what level you can really go at, you need to understand what capabilities or resources you have. This isn't like work in the same way that, sitting down and really think about your value proposition, your business model, market segment. Those take a lot of decisions. This is an awareness of what I'm capable of. Like, for example, you may go down here and say, oh, I want to do an inbound marketing campaign. I want to run paid advertising. It's like I want to run paid ads and I want to bring them to blogs and I want to go in this. And it's like, okay, that's great. And that's going to cost about $5,000 to $10,000 a month. You're going to need a content team that they can go right up on your industry. You have to understand what they're talking about, which means it might cost you, and spend $25K per month to be able to run to that level. And they might go, ooh, we don't really have the funding to be able to do that right now. We need to do something else. And it's like, well, okay. If you go on and don't know what this is going to cost you, what you're capable of doing, and more importantly, don't understand how your business model works, you're going to have a lot of trouble being able to make decisions and know this. So this is not so much decisions. This is just knowing the current state of your business and going like, oh yeah, we don't have any content writers, but we do have a great visual team, right, to be able to do this. Or we do have a team that's able to talk about this. Or hey, we can go in circuits. Whatever it is, understand your capabilities and resources. This to me is not a complete model of what you need. There's obviously a lot of other things you do before go to market. These are the big areas you need to look at to decide, okay, do we have these buttoned up enough that we know, okay, we can put the money over here to actually make this work. So underneath the setup, right? And I break this up into setup into execution because before you can actually go and execute on a new go-to-market strategy, there are certain things you have to do inside of your company to make sure this actually works. The very top thing I'm going to put on here is to put together your ideal customer profile. And it's always said ICP squared because an ideal customer profile is matching the actual problem, the pain of the customer or the person, and then the particular sets of pain we're solving. As opposed to market segmentation and value proposition, we're always kind of looking at a more generic view of what is the value proposition for that we're solving, right? We know the people, there's kind of fuzzy edges on them though, right? And we know where they fit in and we know what segments are. Here we're getting really laser focused on who exactly is the right customer we want to be solving to. Who exactly do we want talking to? If you are a large account organization, you're selling $250,000 product, you might know, oh, okay, I know I'm looking for executives in this particular place. They deal with these sets of problems and you're getting a lot of fine-tuned clarity. Or I'm selling maybe I want to create a dating app, right? I say, oh, I know I'm looking for people who are looking for a very specific type of mate. Maybe they're over the age of 50 or they want to look someplace else and I want to create an app that solves these problems and they have these sets of needs. Here you're getting really, really fine-tuned into what's that relationship between the exact individual you have and the problem that starts to create a scope of who exactly you should be able to go and attack, and who you should be targeting. That's the first area. Second area, before anything else, is positioning. We've played around with this at Lucid, talking about, whether or not we should rebrand around this, because before you get into things like brandings and visuals, before you get into what channels you need to go into, you need to figure out where in the world you fit in the mind of your customer and what they perceive. We don't spend a lot of time talking about your competitors inside of our business. Inside of any business that we talk about. We do very little analysis of the competitive landscape from the perspective, at least compared to what we do for the customers and what looking at our clients' customers and looking at how they perceive us. But it's important to know your customers are going to be making decisions about their products. They're going to be making decisions on what pain solutions what solutions they're going to be going after for their pains. So the question is, where are you going to fit into that mix, and what place do you want to have in their mind when they start to think about you? Where do you fit in? And depending on the market, depending on where it is, there might be different things, right? If you go a decade ago when SaaS really wasn't as big, right? It was growing and big. You could go out and say, oh, okay, I'm going to create a SaaS product and it's all located in the cloud and we're going to make that, and your position is we're a tech-forward organization, and you can take your healthcare data and put it on there. And I've worked for a startup that actually did that, right? And that, at that time, would make a pretty good position. But now you think about it, if I came out and said, oh, we're a SaaS product that does healthcare, is that a position we want to hold anymore, right? Are we putting ourselves in a quadrant where there are dozens of other innovators, right? Are you one of the, or a dozen other companies and people who've been in this space for a decade? Do you look at yourself and list? I think about those lists you go on, right? Like when you look at like, healthcare SaaS or whatever, and there's like literally 100 competitors that you go down just like, do we really want to be comparing in that space? For positioning, you are really proactively, before you go through anything else, deciding where exactly do we want to play? Where exactly do we want to hunt? When we're talking about our market segmentation, we're talking about our value proposition, where can we be effective and where do we want to be effective? Because often you can take multiple positions inside of a market, right? You don't want to take, or you could potentially take multiple places. That if we map this out and look at you and say, well, you could be considered a low-cost competitor, right? Because they are cheap, because they, maybe my client has a cheaper product. It's like, but do we really want that? Do we want to be the fast product, right? Or do we want to be the really high-touch premium experience? Or do we want to leverage that we're really easy to integrate, right? To do that and to know what that looks like. When you understand your positioning, that all of a sudden starts to inform the rest of your customer acquisition pipeline, which is to say, well, how do we talk about our messaging? How do we talk about anything else? But if you don't understand that, often your branding can go in a odd direction because it may look good, but it's missing something because it's not attracting the right people. This builds off of ICP and decides exactly who you want to be. The next thing beyond that is we talk about brand. Now, branding as an activity is really about how do we want the customers to feel about us and what are the things that they're going to look at, what do they want to be, what is the emotion they want to be invoked when they look at your brand, what position do they want to have in your head. But positioning kind of defines a space on the map. Brand is now how we're going to go after that, right? And it encompasses all the activities from how do we want to look and feel, how does the brand, how do we make decisions about the brand, where do we want to go, where do we not want to go, and then really start to get down to the nitty gritty of, okay, what does the visual design look like? What does how do we want to talk about this? What are the different pieces of messaging that we're going to put out and what is it going to look like, right? Brand itself is not going to lead itself into a specific channel, but it will inform when we go onto Facebook and Instagram, these are the things that we're going to do. This is how we're going to look. This is the tone we're going to have. And then that also gets us into another area, which is really messaging. Which is if I look at brand and I look at how does it feel, messaging is what exactly are we going to say at each individual step, right? Or how are we going to talk about this? What are the key points that are going to be important to our customers? So when we know the ICP, we understand the positioning, right? Who we're targeting, what pain points, what position we want in comparison to the market, and what place do we want in the mind of the buyer. We then start to talk about the nitty-gritty of what does the messaging look like at this point? When we talk, how do they speak? And that starts to inform a lot of the details about what the full brand is going to look like when we start to build out more of these details. Now, again, same thing with brand, where we can decide, oh, we're a fun brand, right? And then you start to decide what the colors and where you want to sit in the market. Same thing with messaging. What are you talking about? What are you not talking about? What are the terms of which what are the channels that become available to you because you're willing to talk in a certain way? And what I mean by that is if you're a brand that's based on shock value, you may have some weird PR to go out there versus if you're trying to play mellow and low key, that may mean, oh shoot, we really can't be using curse words or anything like that, or we can't be using anything like that. Now, messaging could be a subset of brand. We found it's important enough to break it out basically, and at least the way we talk about it. But these end up being set up. Now, the reason I say these are set up is because we're not actually doing anything that looks like customer acquisition at this point, right? The analogy I use here is to say, let's say you're used to riding horseback. Say it's way a long time ago and you're used to riding horseback and you can travel at a certain pace. And then all of a sudden you decide you want to go across the country and you're going to do it on horseback and it's going to take you this long or you're going a far distance away. Then I say, hold on, I have this thing called a car. And if you use the car, you're going to go way, way further, way, way faster. But before you can get into that car, I need to tell you how to use it, right? and you say, well, okay, fine, I'm going to spend some time using it, right? And we start going through the details of the car, which is say, okay, this is how you steer. You have to know how to do fuel. You know, if it breaks down, you may have these issues where a tire out. So you in your mind, as you're learning about how to change a flat tire, might go, man, if I was on that horse, I'd be days away now, right? You know, I'd be way further out than I am right now, and I have to do fuel, and this is kind of weird, right? You start to get all into these little details. But then, all of a sudden, you get into the car, all this is done basically, and then, boom, you take off. And you can go much, much, much further than you did before because you understood all those things. That's why setup is important. That's why we go through these steps to make sure that if you're going to be doing a particular channel or a particular activity, you understand your customers, your position, your brand, and your messaging to make sure you have the most effective exits you can. Now, entrance into your market, your go-to-market strategy. So the final thing we're going to talk about is now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the execution, where we actually start to talk about how we're going to get customers. First off, at the very top is customer journey. And when we talk about customer journey, we talk specifically about the exact people we want to target and the markets we want to target them in. And we know what our positioning says and our brand and messaging. So we decide, okay, what is the first place they're going to see us, right? We think about the awareness phase of it, which is to say, okay, so random person, maybe it's a dating user, right? Somebody over 50 who wants to date and whatever. How are they going to hear about us, right? And there's certain channels they're going to be available to. It's like, well, do we want them to see us as an ad? They could see that. Are there going to be certain problems that they're thinking about that time, right? Customer journey talks about specifics of what are the pain points they're feeling at that particular moment, and then when they see something, what's going to attract them to our particular brand at that point, right? This goes a wide range of areas, right? This can go anywhere from if you're trying to download an app, it could be they see us in the app store the first time and we're saying this thing, we're the fastest app or we are the most productive or we're going to make them useful. They click on it and they go in and then we understand what the pain points are at that point. So when they click, we can kind of say, this is what we think the message is, which leads us to the next level. They go from the next area, which is, okay, now they clicked on our ad and now they're at the app store, right? And then we're trying to convince them to convert. And at that point, what problems am I thinking about? You're starting to think about where their headspace is when they're actually staring at it. As you can see, this is a lot more visceral than at this stage, which is we're trying to think of what exactly are they feeling at every single step. And this is true for any type of sale. If you're doing a large account sale, you're also thinking about customer journey, but you're also thinking, okay, I'm selling a $10 million contract to IBM and I have multiple people, but when I go out to the customer, what are they going to be thinking about? What problems are they going to be doing? Who do they have to just talk to internally before they can buy it? What does that map look like, right? You're thinking through beginning to, I say the end, but for most products, you're talking about retention, right? So it even goes beyond the sale, which is I download the app, I sign the contract, and then what are they going to go through next? What does onboarding look like? After they go through onboarding, how do you talk to them? How do you discuss what they're going through? And what pain points are they dealing with? You're really mapping it out so you're creating this boundary of where we know our customers are going to be thinking about these problems, and when they see those problems, we're wanting them to take these particular actions, right? Or these actions are reasonable for them to take. When I say reasonable, it is, for example, it's not very likely somebody's going to buy a $10 billion contract because they see an ad on there, but I may stop by McDonald's, right? If I see an ad that says a Big Mac and I said, hey, that looks pretty good, might stop by. You think through all the steps, and that goes into how does your customer journey actually, how do you define that customer journey, and where do you sit, and what are the pain points in each area, what are the touch points, how you talk up with them, et cetera, et cetera. Then we get into the actual channel analysis. And I think this one is really important, especially if you're doing this for the first time, which is, okay, great. We know our customers. We understand exactly where we want to be with them. What are they expecting at every single step, right? Like, for example, if I go and know that I'm educating my customers on my product and that they're going to have to see us a few times there, right? It's like, hey, they're interested in they're curious about AI. They weren't sure that it could be with a healthcare product, right? Or maybe it's a productivity app there. Maybe I want to learn about it. So when they come in, it's like, okay, well, currently right now, do customers like to read newsletters? Do they like to go to events? Do they like to, do they listen to podcasts? Do they listen to these different areas? You start to look out and see, oh, okay, so my customers, we think today, at least right now, they tend to scroll on LinkedIn. They tend to go through newsletters. They sign up for newsletters. they're listening to podcasts, they're doing these other things. And when they're in that space, they're thinking about these particular problems. So for us, we know that based on their customer journey and the pain points, these are the ways that we can interact with them, right? And this is the entire space we can go into. What you're doing here is primarily eliminating channels that may not work for you or won't support you. Like for example, if you're running an enterprise company, you're probably not going to run ads, at least not at this stage. There's a reason why Coke runs big ads, and at least at an early stage startup, that probably isn't the right play for you to be doing. But you may also say, hey, we might find an interesting avenue where it's like, oh, we know that people are going on TikTok, for example, and that they're starting to age up, and there might be an opportunity for us to go into TikTok, right? So social plus video might be an interesting strategy to go into. What you're really doing here is you're trying to figure out of all the options you have available to you, which ones do you have access to, and where is your space you might play? Which leads us into the next area, which is the actual sales funnel. So what I'm describing here is the actual boots on the ground work to actually get customers. The reason we've done all of this work so far is so that we can sit in the sales funnel and go, okay, now we know we could do ads, we could do this thing. Which things are we actually going to do? And this is when you get into the details of, okay, I now need a Facebook account to run Facebook ads or Instagram ads, or I need to now engage with the customer. I now need to engage with a firm that can then run social ads for us, or they might write content, or we might need a newsletter writer. You start to think through, and as opposed to customer journey, which is really dealing with what emotions they have at each particular stage and what actions they're taking, here you're actually drawing out, this is how it's going to happen. And so you actually start talking about technology, which is they come into LinkedIn and they see my post, they click on the post, they see a link. They click on that link, it goes to our website, which has a newsletter pop-up. They sign up for a newsletter. Then we go into the newsletter and we send them newsletters every week, month, whatever the cadence is, whatever you decide. And inside that sales funnel, we have this messaging, this brand. We're talking about these activities that matter. You see how this is starting to come together? And you start to build this out. And what you're now doing is you're trying to experiment to figure out what strategies are going to give us the best ROI on what we do. We think we might have to run ads, but you may run ads and that might not be true, right? And so you build your sales funnel, see it doesn't work, and you say, okay, ads don't work, but maybe social content will work. Or maybe we want to do events. Maybe that's the better thing for us to do, right? Where we say, we go out to events and we network with folks, and maybe that's another way to bring people in. But really, what we're talking about is if the customer journey defines how people feel and what they need to hear, the sales funnel is how does it actually get into our system and how does our team actually do work? Underneath this, you have a bunch of different strategies for each individual channel and each individual part of your organization, right? You have the person who builds the website and makes sure the analytics are sitting out there. You have the person who actually goes to the events on your behalf. You have the person who runs the ads and see this is how they're going to run. You have the content team that actually creates the content. You have the designer who's taking your brand and messaging and making sure the ads look correct. You have content writers coming up with many, many different types of ideas. All of this exists here, and those start to create the management structure on how these teams work together, and you see it as all one cohesive thing. But you as the founder know this is the job it needs to be doing, and so if people are inside this, they need to be driving one single strategy to get people towards sales, which gets us to the final stage here. What's the last thing? It's really the strategy and operations. Which is, okay, we have a particular strategy, right? Everything up here says we have lots of different channels, we know what positioning, brand messaging we have here, but now we have a limited number of resources. Remember this? And we say, we're gonna run $2,000 a month, and we're going to see if that actually works. And based on that, we're hoping to see this result. We're hoping to get this many people onto our website. We're hoping a conversion rate of this amount. We're hoping this many people actually sign up for calls with our company and to go in. We're hoping to get this level of conversion, and you start to look at the numbers. So you decide you want to run this. So you know the operations, which is, okay, who's the team that's actually going to take care of this? Or what's the consulting firm? How often we're going to deal with them? Who's the contractor? Whatever it is, to go and say, what do they need to be driving? And on strategy side, you know from a top level, we need to be driving this many sales to the organization on a quarterly, monthly, yearly basis, whatever it is. Here's the churn rate we're looking at. And then you start to decide, okay, this isn't working right now, right? And it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to run one of these strategies and have it run perfectly the first time. So then you decide, okay, that didn't work. We had an assumption up here about maybe the channels we looked at. Maybe the customer journey was wrong because we decided, oh, we're not sure the direction we're going to. maybe we realize, oh shoot, we chose a position that actually conflicts with somebody, right? So maybe we have to go back here and we need to think about something. But now you actually have a system that you're running. The benefit of this over what most startups are doing is that you can go and look at any point and point back to, oh, we screwed up this, right? Or this seems strong, but messaging, we're talking about the wrong thing, right, at this point, which may change things. But when you're done with this, when you've actually done this for a period of time, and again, markets evolve, you're constantly going to have to come back to this and update this over time. But when you do this right, what ends up happening is you sit mostly a little bit here, but mostly here and here, which is, hey, are we driving the number of sales we expected? Are we getting the number of leads? Do we have the right number of, do we have the right number of ads going out, strategy, and things like that? And you can have people underneath you who can then go and say, oh yeah, here's my ads manager, and they're running the operation, and here's the number they have. And you can see if you're scaling at the right level. To me, this is what I think we have to understand, or founders have to understand in order to be able to run their system the right way. The conflict here is that there's a level of depth that a founder just can't get into. The amount of material that's written on brand is massive. And as a founder, could you benefit on reading from all that material? Absolutely. Is it the absolute most important thing you need to be doing? Probably not, considering everything else you have to do. And this is just the customer acquisition system. This isn't talking about your product development, the operations inside your business, the scaling, the fundraising, your own health along the way to make sure this happens. So I'm trying to take this and strip this down to the absolute minimum required to look at. And then within each of these, you can start to understand what do we have to get right and what does my team have to get right in order to be able to make this work. So anyway, I hope that was useful for you. This is quite a bit of research is starting to go into this to understand this. My goal is to start to explain each of these areas a little bit more clearly, to start to get into, we think we have a positioning problem, so how exactly do we go about solving that? That's the type of problem that we're looking to solve and what I'm going to be talking about over the coming ups. So anyway, again, my name is Brian Schuster. If you have any questions, I would love to chat with you, and thank you so much for watching.